So yesterday, January 26th at 4:30, there was one of the man, Robert Lavoy Finicum, was killed. This is one of the occupiers, one of the Oregon militia was killed. They killed him, man. There's a martyr. Now we got a fucking martyr in our hands. We could have starved him out. We could have done some other things. You could have maybe negotiated with them, right? But now they're fucking killed. Unfortunately, I'm not 100% behind them. Actually, when you look into it, it's very complicated stuff. It's federal lands, and federal lands charge people to graze and to do other things on their land, but it's the government's land. But I remember Occupy, and why is it the government's land? It's a democracy, so that means government land means it's our land, and why do the authorities fucking tell us what to fucking do and tell us, what to pay for? They just wanted their own shit. If they would have fought to end homelessness, end landlessness, black people are supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. That was the whole theory of reparations. There could have been a land reform, the Homestead Act. We could have revitalized the economy, the guaranteed basic income. There's lots of things that they could have protested for something greater, something bigger, but essentially they're like, oh, we want to do whatever the fuck we want to do. And ideologically, I'm against them, but I wasn't against their tactics. They were nonviolent. They were occupying. And just like Occupy, they had changed the narrative. They single-handedly changed the narrative. Occupy failed. I think there might have been one death out of the entire country for Occupy. Now we got a fucking martyr. Good job. The FBI is what I heard, that it was the FBI, and they weren't on the Martyred National Wildlife Refuge, the bird sanctuary. They weren't actually on there. They temporarily left. Ammon Bundy has been arrested. His brother had been shot. And this Robert Lavoy Finicum, R.I.P. Robert Lavoy Finicum. This motherfucker died for his belief. I cannot hate this man. I can't hate any of these people for doing what they did. They came across on YouTube. They put out their message. They talked to the media. Even people that were sort of mocking them and kind of hostile, they talked to them. They got their information out there. Nonviolent. They were occupiers. So when the Nelson Mandela, he had figured out that nonviolence wasn't working. This is in South Africa against, some violent bullshit. But when Nelson Mandela thought that nonviolence wasn't working, he said, well, we got to go violent. Well, how are you going to do violence then? Well, he had three options. He said revolution. Well, that's full-on warfare. He didn't have enough resources, time, manpower to go on full-on war, so he said no revolution. Then he said terrorism. Well, terrorism turns people against you. Terrorism is attacking civilians for political ends. So, going around killing innocent people, that's no good either. So he couldn't do a full protracted war, full revolution. He couldn't do terrorism. So he went and did sabotage. And that's what they did. They went around blowing up buildings. And so they blew up buildings, So that's, destruction of property. And no, you shouldn't destroy property. But what else, what else can you do? That was the same thing the suffragettes did. The suffragettes who wanted the women's right to vote. Women do deserve a right to vote, and they had to go around, initiating violence, and eventually that woman walks out in front of that fucking horse and gets ran over and killed to get the king's attention just so women would get the right to vote. And when they did it, they were a minority group. In fact, the minority groups, small groups, that's the only thing that's ever changed the world. But there was a minority group fighting for a bigger cause. Everybody was against them. Media was against them. Public was against them. They tried to shame them, treat them like shit for something they were clearly right. Women should have a right to vote. So these people they're not terrorists. They're not revolutionaries. They're not even sabotagers. The ones who sabotaged it was Dwight and Stephen Hammond. Dwight and Stephen Hammond set fire to the federal land. Some people say it's for poaching. Other people say it's probably for poaching, but, I don't, they're doing it for something, they're protecting themselves, I don't know, it gets complicated, but Dwight and Stephen Hammond were the two people that got arrested. They had to serve 4 years in prison, and right before they went, this protest started. So, Dwight and Stephen Hammond, it started over them, and then eventually it became Ammon Bundy, and Ammon Bundy kind of changed it a little bit. But Dwight and Stephen Hammond, I didn't give a fuck for. I didn't give a fuck about Dwight and Stephen Hammond. They were, they were jailed for whatever reasons, but they were child beaters. They took their cousin, I forget the guy's name, I want to say D.H. or something, but they took the cousin, Dwight and Stephen Hammond, and because he got a tattoo or he carved a B in his name or something, they took a cheese grater or carved out his fucking name name, like, I don't know, he wrote a letter on his chest, I think, like the letter B, and then they try to fucking fillet it out, or they try to cut his fucking tattoo off of him. I mean, that's fucked up. There's some other shit that they did too, but just abusive towards children. So fuck Dwight and Stephen Hammond. Fuck the two individuals that eventually, you know, started all this. But once they started occupying, they were peaceful, so they were occupiers in defense of sabotage. They set fire. Dwight and Stephen Hammond set the fire, but the occupiers didn't set any fires. They didn't do any type of, you know, violence whatsoever. So I think because ideologically, you know, they're not liberal or Democrat, there's a lot of people that's pissed off about it, but you're not really looking at the, I mean, look at what they actually did. Terrorism is attacking civilians for a political end. They didn't do that. They didn't do that. There was no violence at all on their part. All they did was just say, you know, they took over this bird sanctuary on a weekend when it was in the middle of nowhere and nobody was paying attention, so they said, hey, this is ours now. That's what fucking Occupy did. The Occupy, though, was trying to end homelessness and landlessness. So instead, if they were trying to do something like that, we have homeless people, but federal, the federal government owns like fucking acres upon acres upon acres of land. How do we have homeless at all when the federal government has acres and acres? If I wanted to sleep in the Daniel Boone National Forest, I would get fucking booted out. If you're a homeless person, you got no place to go. Where the fuck are you supposed to go? Shouldn't you be allowed to use the government supposed, this is all of our property, right? That's the whole idea of government, is it's collectively all of ours, but apparently it's just the fucking Nazis, the authorities, whoever says this is mine, right? Who's ever the park rangers, that's who the fucking property is. That's bullshit. That's not cool. That's not fair. You know, we could have had land reform, passing it all out, but now instead of doing any type of good thing, we got a fucking martyr on our hands. So who is this man? Robert Lavoy Finicum. I have no intention of spending any of my days in a concrete box. There are things more important than your life, and freedom is one of them. I'm preparing to defend freedom. This is what Robert Lavoy Finicum says. And he's an interesting dude. He's all about God. He's a Mormon. And that's a little fucked up. Ammon Bundy said this whole thing was because God told him to start this, and God told him to do this. And so he's like this big religious nuthead. And you have, just like Baby W. Bush, right? Baby Bush, God told him to invade Iraq and kill 1 million Iraqi people. And, you know, that's insanity. God's telling you to do this. You told yourself to do it. You think it's best. I don't give a shit what invisible person you're fucking talking to. And so, you know, 25 days, they started this January the 2nd. They have changed the narrative. That's all Occupy did in anyways, was change their narrative. They didn't succeed in doing anything. So Ammon Bundy and the Martyred National Wildlife Refuge, the Oregon militia, the Oregon Bird Sanctuary protest, whatever you want to call it, they were just as successful as Occupy was. And you know, now you got a fucking martyr on your hands. There's another thing I just want to mention about Robert Lavoy Finicum. Finicum had 11 foster children. His foster children were taken away from him since he was there. Again, he said this, that there are more things important than your life, and freedom is one of them. He's absolutely right. Give me liberty or give me death. And if you don't have freedom, then you're not living as a man. You're not living as a whole person. And, you know, that's absolutely true. Every person desires freedom. Nobody wants to be told what to do. Finicum also says, I do not want the FBI, federal agents, to have to go running around in the dark, kicking in doors, looking for me. Okay, I want them to know exactly where I'm at. He's added chillingly, I'm telling them right now, don't point guns at me. Don't point any guns at me, because he's saying that he's going to defend himself. And he's absolutely right. If, you know, back in the Old West, you have a holster. You got a gun and it's holstered, then we're all good. Everybody sees the holster, everybody sees the gun, everybody's got guns, and, you know, it's that's how you sort of maintain law and order. You don't want one person coming in with a gun and taking over the whole fucking town. But as soon as you pull that gun, as soon as you pull it out of your holster, then you possibly mean to do harm, and people can gun you down right then and there. So they were nonviolent. They were occupiers in defense of sabotage, but they didn't do any sabotage. There's other ways to nonviolently protest. You could have sit-ins. You could have demonstrations. You could have a phone call, right? You can write your senators. You could get on the radio and bitch. You can, you know, talk on a fucking in the middle of your room, right, to a camera. So there's lots of nonviolent ways to protest, to say that you don't like something, and that's, you know, they were nonviolent. So even though sabotage is what Nelson Mandela did, he rejected terrorism, he rejected revolution. What they did was not terrorism. And Cliven Bundy said that the government drew first blood. So apparently the FBI was there. The FBI killed, or one of the government agencies, one of the police officers, whoever pulled them over because they left the sanctuary, and that's when they got pulled over. That's when Ammon Bundy got arrested, his brother was shot, and Robert Lavoy Finicum was killed when they left the bird sanctuary. And so according to Cliven Bundy, the government drew first blood. I believe it, and that's just, man, they couldn't have fucking done it peacefully. They didn't know how to do it peacefully. The last thing I want to mention is, well, I guess there's two things I want to mention. There's 2 people that was killed at a homeless encampment. 3 were wounded in Seattle. So there's worse shit that happens in homeless encampments, and that's why I think that if they would have fought to end homelessness, if they would have fought to end landlessness, they would have been so much more successful. 2 people were killed at the homeless encampment. 3 were wounded in Seattle. So it was a worse bloodbath than what this, you know, mess is in Oregon. But now you have Robert Lavoy Finicum, a man who didn't deserve to die. He didn't deserve to die. And the very last thing I want to talk about, fuck you old ass hypocrites, okay? So anybody against reparations, anybody against a guaranteed basic income, everybody getting a check, that's what Martin Luther King wanted to do. That's also what that right-wing Milton Friedman. So Milton Friedman, a right-wing economist, and then MLK, you know, a democratic socialist. You got the far left and the far right sitting there saying that the guaranteed basic income is the way to go. It wipes out poverty. It gives everybody a $10,000 check. But you old-ass hypocrites, if you old-ass motherfuckers, I mean, if you're taking a check, you're getting a check, you're getting Social Security, and you're getting a check every goddamn fucking, you know, month, and you're going to sit there and say that other people can't get a fucking check, you're an old-ass hypocrite. And don't even tell me that you paid for it. That is not how Social Security works. You didn't fucking pay for it. You didn't pay for it. You put money into it, yeah, a long time ago, but that went to the old people before you. Right now it comes, we're the ones paying for your asses. The people, the working class people right now are paying for the people that's living on Social Security. That money is going straight to the old fucking people, and they don't do shit, and they vote. So these old ass motherfuckers who's getting a check is sitting there voting against everybody else in this fucking country. That's bullshit. They're fucking entitled, they're fucking privileged, they get a fucking check, they act like they earned it. No, I've met many motherfuckers that's on Social Security, don't look, they ain't earning it at all. If anything, the government's helping your ass, then you should use your privilege in helping other people, but that is not what you're doing. So, you know, FBI, you fucked up, right? FBI told fucking MLK he needed to go kill himself. The FBI tapped Pete Seeger. The FBI tapped Nikola Tesla. The FBI was founded by J. Edgar Hoover, and he came out of the Palmer raids. So the Red Scare, they was totally against communism and communists and anybody that thought differently than the government, and that was all that they were fucking against. And they deported Emma Goldman. And what the fuck, you know, they fucking killed this man, and so, you know, that was a bad PR for them, Robert Lavoy Finicum, but this is a life, and I heard that he got killed with his hands up, so people want to compare the Black Lives Movement with the Robert Lavoy Finicum. He died with his hands up. That's the report so far, and, you know, they were nonviolent, and they were all nonviolent. They said that he was a God-fearing man or whatever, which I don't give a fuck about the God-fearing man, but I do think that it's, you know, he was known as the tarp man, so he's got a tarp over him, he's right there in the middle in front of everybody else, and he's basically saying, look, I'm right here, and if you're coming after me, you know, come straight for me, but don't act like do some shit behind closed doors and act like I tried to do something when I didn't do that. They meant to be nonviolent, is my point. They didn't go there trying to hurt anybody. They wanted to make a point. They had a protest with Dwight and Stephen Hammond, who went to jail anyways, but they just, essentially, it's against government tyranny. They're talking about the government keeps on encroaching more and more of their land, and they've had enough. What they're doing is very personal. They want to be able to drill and take all the resources for themselves and let the cattle graze on, the federal land and do as they please. Historically, they say that's what they've always been able to do. They're being very selfish. They want their business and their industry to, do whatever they want to do. I don't agree with their ends, with their aims, but their tactics were not bad. Their tactics wasn't bad. It was an occupation. It was a peaceful occupation. And, if you're just mad because they did something and you don't believe in anything. In fact, this is something that I was trying to do in Letcher County. You have a strip coal mine. You got all this land, strip coal mine. I'm in favor of land reform. And in fact, land reform is a way to stop communism. If everybody's got a chunk of land, everybody's got a house, everybody's got a shop, if everybody's got the same opportunities, then that gives people, when people have their own land and their own house, that gives them a sense of ownership. It gives them a reason to go out and hustle and get the things that they want to get. And the people like that. The people like that. They like owning their own things. They like owning their own house. They like living on their own land. The people like that, and that stops communism because that gives them a stake, a dog in the fight. But instead, you got tenants, you got poor people, 1 million poor people in Kentucky, you got homeless people in every fucking city. Homeless in America, the richest country in the world. If there's ever a better example of capitalism failing, it's the pollution, it's poverty, it's homelessness. Capitalism doesn't solve all problems. Many fucking problems are here because of capitalism, and only a political solution will stop a lot of these problems. So if these were the issues that they were for, also the private company taking all of our resources, right? Federal land, that's all of our land. So if there's gold, I was going to say uranium. I don't know if there's uranium, but there's gold, oil, gas, natural gas. There's dirt, right? Something else too, timber. So these are things that private companies are going on federal lands, and they get a fucking high dollar. They make lots of profits off of our property. Our property, the government, which is all of ours, they take and they making money just like the public airwaves. The private fucking companies come in here, take all this shit away from us. And what good does Daniel Boone National Forest do for me? Daniel Boone National Forest doesn't do shit for me. Daniel Boone National Forest just fucking sits there. And maybe once in a while we go fucking visit, and that's nice, it's a nice little refuge it can be for people who wants to go hiking and camping and stuff like that, but that's a lot of acreage, and there's a lot of needy people. And what I was trying to talk about with the land, it's a way to stop communism, but also there's a lot of wasted land, a lot of absentee landlords. The land in Letcher County, it was stripped coal mine land. They've stripped all the coal out, and now it's just sitting there. It's just fucking sitting there. Nobody's doing a fucking thing with it. And so that is land that homeless people would love. That's land that, anybody, the way the Homestead Act was, you filled out an application, you take care of the land for 5 years. If you do that, it's yours free and clear. That gives people a good chance. Give them a fucking piece of land. That's where all revolution was based on land. So land reform, a house, 40 acres and a mule, in homelessness, in landlessness. What the fuck, government? Robert Lavoy Finicum, you killed him with his hands up. FBI, that's some bullshit, man. So, R.I.P. Robert Lavoy Finicum. R.I.P. man. Peace.